hand over to Bob. So looking forward to hearing more about promoting active engagement with our students and the various approaches that you've been using. Take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you, Ian, Lisa, and Rachel for giving me the opportunity to speak to you this afternoon. This is very much ideas that actually came out of the lockdown period that we were just got out of. You'll see that in the presentation there are a number of QR codes, which incidentally I picked up from Ian, from listening to one of his presentations. So it just shows you how these things do share knowledge. So these are just some of the active ideas that really stayed on with us after lockdown had finished, and really keen to not to try to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So where did this idea begin for me? Well, some of the ideas began with coming along to these symposia, seeing the use of QR codes and seeing actually how we can embed these materials actually into the lecture slides. The beginning for me was I've been writing to students now weekly for a good number of years, for about probably over 10 years now. And what I actually do at the end of each year, I do a little stock take on what were the ideas that worked this year and what didn't work, and I'm really trying to refine the materials year on year based on what students tell me. This is in addition to the module evaluation. This is what I refer to as a continual improvement questionnaire, and you can see there from the presentation that I share these actually as part of the newsletter. So now that returning face to face, I thought I'd sort of share a few of these tips that I'd stumbled on as we'd gone through those difficult times. And interestingly, keen now not to throw the baby out, as I've said, with the bathwater. There were some good ideas, some innovations that actually came out of that. So hitherto, I would always set my baseline essentially based on the NSS criteria. So I look at the NSS criteria, put myself a little questionnaire together, and then say to students, well, actually, how did we shape up against these, the NSS? I actually went along to another symposia when I actually found these metrics, I suppose, named the principles of good learning, teaching, and assessment. And so what I did this year was actually think, well, I'll ditch the NSS for a year, and I'll see how we shape up against these criteria. So you'll see that there are 7 areas, and it shows you really where we should effectively sort of focus. So that was the baseline really for me for this year. This is where it started off. So this is effectively the outcomes of that questionnaire at the end of last year's teaching, in a way really to sort of promote continuous improvement, not keep bouncing from one idea to another, trying to build on what's worked before and what hasn't. Now, in fairness, this wasn't ever so well populated. It wasn't highly subscribed to by students, but the ideas that came out of it really sort of gave me an idea of sort of where to focus. And one that came out, although it was not a unreasonable score, 70%, was helping learners understand what good looks like, which I took to mean producing active feedback. So that was that's been my mantra really for this year, sort of focusing on feedback. These are just some of the narrative comments from the student voice questionnaire at the end of last year. Some of the positives, what they said we did well, what they said I did well, what they said we could improve upon. So the positives were support, good content, and so forth. Interestingly, identifying important points in red. And actually nowadays, even hyperlinking some terms that students actually may not be ever so familiar with. So rather than actually, have the guts to put their hands up, they can actually research those terms in a little bit more detail. So the areas to work on were to try to get more active participation. We were using polling software at the time. So really to try to make sure that we make the use of that. So this slide actually now is embedded into my slide pack for the year ahead, feeding back to the students actually just how their opinions and their what they've said has been taken forward. So that's actually from the slides this year. And again, feeding back in this way, students, you said we did. So I spent a good amount of summer going through the changes and actually making it obvious then to students actually how their views have been taken forward. So yeah, I think I mentioned the hyperlinks, feedback as we go. That was interesting, and again, I'll explain that a little bit more in the presentation. Providing some audio feedback to, as well as written feedback, and interestingly, putting some trigger warnings in. So my focus really has been on looking at all those things and really trying to provide this 360-degree feedback as we go through the year, and really not at the end. So in essence, there it's what I've referred to as feeding back the feedback, and actually showing students actually how their actions, how their student voice has been listened to. So the feedback as is. I started by actually looking and reflecting back a little bit on my time in full-time academia, where we would always run the module evaluation at the end of the process. That's really when they were run. Generally speaking, was my experience, they were poorly engaged with, not overly representative, and sometimes occasionally skewed by people who weren't too satisfied. And above all, you can see that it was just after the event, so it gave us no opportunity to actually make changes as the student was, as we were going ahead. And I've just put in the call out box at the bottom there just one example of how this worked for me this year, where it was the first lecture, and I had a student in the class who had a hearing impairment, and told me very quickly, fed back very quickly and anonymously, that she actually couldn't hear, and that enabled me to actually make those changes very quickly. And reflecting on what some might have been, I actually could have got all the way through the year, or through the module, without that student being particularly able to hear. So for some reason, I don't know why this doesn't show as a series of interventions around the clock face. I've tried to paste it again even today as a picture, but what you should see there are a series of interventions around a clock face. What I've referred to as the corrective loop. So we start off, when we look at developing modules, we start off by delivering, planning the delivery and so forth. At Kent, we have a midterm evaluation. So we do this in fact, we did it only a week or so ago last week. So around about week 8 or week 7. But my point is that we actually lose quite a bit of impetus. We actually lose quite a bit of the opportunity to actually engage with students as we're moving around that clock face, and right the way to number 7, around about 8 o'clock at night, where you can see the traditional end of term module evaluation. So this really came out of some ideas I'd been experimenting with during the Teams chat era. So when we were delivering materials online, using the Teams chat, effectively to sort of follow up with students after the event. What I found was that the lectures were very much specified to 1 hour and 1 hour only. So there was no room for getting sidelined by questions. So I thought, well, actually, how can I sort of take this forward? Like I say, it wasn't possible to do this in class, but I would effectively cut and paste the Teams chat into a Word document, and then follow up that with what I refer to as a weekly lecture digest. So that the topics that I hadn't necessarily covered as well as I perhaps could have done, or if people still wanted to ask questions, they could be put in that feedback, and I would follow up on that. So It replaces, well, it doesn't replace it, it adds to the midterm evaluation. This adds also to the end of term module evaluation. And it gives me more opportunity to interact with students, to engage with students all the way around from that week 1 all the way around to the end of the module. So this is how it looks now. I've, once again, thank you to Ian for putting me onto QR codes, because they do give you that opportunity to actually share this material actually whilst it's on screen. I have linked a QR code very simply to a Microsoft form. It's an anonymous form, and of course students can then feedback in class in real time. And I found that looking back at the sort of previous module evaluations, we would probably get 5 or 6 people engaged with this. Literally, we get 40 or 50 people bringing their feedback in. And this is how it represents week on week. So I do this now literally almost every lecture. So you can see for just one module this year, 233 participants, just massively increased on previously. It's very quick to complete, and it can be displayed in an Excel format. So I can actually, and in fact, do take these data away and actually look at these to see, what more can I, what I can improve upon as we go through. And it gives me a real-time rating. So each week I can sort of see how the, what the level of satisfaction is. I think it was currently about 4.8, something like so forth. So this is just another example of how it works. It gives me real-time satisfaction week on week, rather than waiting for either the module evaluation or the end of term module evaluation. So I'm hoping to take out any surprises that might be lurking at the end of the year. So once again, you can see that I just ask students just a couple of questions. It's in essence, it's not a feedback form per se, but it's just saying to look, are there any things that I could explain a little differently? Just taking that's one stage further, rather than doing it on Teams, actually now doing it by the QR code, and then the rolling form, which I actually keep now as my sort of feedback document. I also illustrate this as a word cloud, so it gives you an idea of sort of things that are working well and things where we've got potentially problems. So that's just one of the questions that's used in this sort of in this type of approach. So once again, you can see on this occasion 113 participants, much more representative, and being able to then read to feedback and to change things in real time. So students have fed back a little bit too quick. We can actually rectify that straight away. We can say a little bit quiet, so I've tried to speak up. They've told me what they like. They like the online polling type interactive stuff. Yeah, they've interacted really well with the Q&A, and also like the way in which we respond to their comments. So each week the feedback form gets uploaded to our Moodle page, and so students can see in real time and can actually be signposted to other topics, other things, other resources that they may need. This is just one example from stage 3, and again you can see how it's a rolling document. It opens up actually, everyone. So if you want to scan it with your phone, you'll see that it opens up into a rolling document, which I update as students are as they respond to it. The red writing you can actually see is my response to their questions or to their observations. Like many others, I've extended the pre-read materials, and we also really take that one stage further now by using that to form a little quiz to start with. So the lectures now start off with a little quiz based on the pre-read, and I'm sure that's not too dissimilar to what other colleagues have done. And again, using the polling software to start this little icebreaker. So this is a slide from one of the first lectures. Sorry, the first slide of one of the lectures. So getting them to complete this little online poll is good. So it's an icebreaker. We use VBox, but there are others, Ombria and the like. This really coincided, and it's fortuitous really that the previous speaker was speaking about decolonising the curricula, because I've been also promoting the diversity mark approach at Kent. So we now make good use of Padlets. I don't know if people use Padlets, but that QR code there is an example of our Padlet, and it gives me an opportunity, a platform to signpost and to actually post things on Padlet that I wouldn't necessarily be able to put into the lecture materials. So it gave me an opportunity, as it says there, to really promote diversity mark, tell students what we were doing, and nowadays if I see any diversity mark type topic, of course they go straight on the on that Padlet. This is just an example of how I use now interactive polling. So this is about sort of 15 or 20 slides in, to say, look, is this, how are we going so far? Is it too fast? Is it too slow? How are you enjoying it? And then it appears on their, live on their screen, just how much they've sort of fed back, as effectively as we go along. And once again, this is all done in a safe environment. No one's, it doesn't rely upon people having the guts to, put their hands up. It's anonymous, and it just sort of shows just the state of play as we go. And once again, similarly with concluding materials, following up with those, and then sort of feeding that through into the next lecture as we move forward. So I'm sure that's been in common with lots of things that other colleagues have done. Once again, this is another way. So this is again taken from all my slide packs, where I make it obvious that the students' views are welcomed, and I will always respond, because it's not just a case of putting this information in and then it just going into a black hole. Constructive critique I found to be incredibly helpful, and so this appears in really at the end of each slide pack. So we take this opinion, we take this sound bite every time. It's a lot more frequent than we would do. And again, this is done while we're in class, so it doesn't rely upon people, walking off and then, forgetting to do the module evaluation, as I would probably if I were doing this. So it's actually done there and then. And another little quirk actually I've found with the MS forms is that they can actually be set up to give you an alert. It can actually send you an email. So it's quite reassuring to actually see these remarks, pinging on your, on your smartwatch as you're actually, delivering the lecture. So it's a big shift from where we were before, with the end of module evaluation, or indeed the midterm evaluation. So that's, I think I've mentioned that already. I write up the comments. I will respond to them. And effectively show students what we've actually done based on what they've said. A little bit of things around the edges. I've promoted an active student society ever since I've been at Kent. So we embed those materials, really try to sort of push that heavily. I've found that that's been one of the cornerstones of building the forensic science community. And of course, I promote that heavily. And I've found over the years that the way to do that really has been by providing active academic participation. It's their society, of course it is, but they need, in my experience, they need some help along the way. So that's really what that's been around, supporting them and promoting that vibrant student society. It starts really from week one. So once again, I produced a little handout, a little flyer, of course, which they can access materials in printed format. This is handed out to students when they come on welcome week, and you can see that it contains a little personal hello, a little newsletter, a sample lecture, and effectively settles the students to actually what they can expect whilst they're with us. So I use these similarly on outreach events also. I have also made sure that we fully support widening participation, and will always go to any outreach event that I can possibly go to. But once again, I actually use this as feedback format to actually get feedback from the outreach event. So that's just an example of one feedback, one school or college that I actually went to, where you find out whether it's actually, whether you know whether you hit the spot or not. So, like I said, that's what I've done to effectively find out whether we're hitting the mark or not. Some of you may know that I make use of active social media. I find that that's another opportunity for me to share things like the latest news, the latest jobs. There's often an element of jobs on the page, an element of what's the latest in research, what I actually found each day in terms of research, or in fact professional practice news. So that opens up as our Facebook page, and you'll see there that it keeps. I actually don't think I missed too much. I occasionally miss the odd story here and there, but I think generally speaking we're pretty much on the ball. So in summary, this is it is a work in progress. It's not a one-size-fits-all, but it does appear to be being well received, and effectively showing the students that actually their feedback, their student voice actually matters, and is being taken account of. So as I said, it's not a one-size-fits-all, but it does seem to be having at the minute some real benefits. And then really just to finish off with, I suppose in the spirit of feedback, if you can scan the QR code, you'll see that it opens up into a little sort of feedback form in itself. So, how was this presentation for you? Are there any ideas that you think I've missed? Any ideas for the future? I'd gladly take them. So I think that's the end of my materials, Rachel. So
thank you, Bob. As always, loads and loads of ideas. I don't know where you get the time to do all these things. I really don't. Your newsletters are fantastic that you do deliver to the students. So I'm going to ask two questions at once because one of them's a little bit harder. Sure. So the harder one is, have you ever tried anything that hasn't worked, and would you be willing to share it because you have so many ideas? But the other question is from Rachel, and she's asked about feedback fatigue. Have you ever seen that students suffer from feedback fatigue? I think that's a phenomenon that many of us can resonate with.
I think a yes to both questions, Ian. I think if I'm going to be completely truthful, I think I overcooked it. I have overcooked it a little bit with the interactive polling stuff. So it's okay in measure, but too much. As we're moving through term, I think people are getting a little bit fatigued with the interactive stuff. But certainly some other classes, the early stages actually love it. So I think I'm going to trim that down a little bit. So I would say in one series of slides, you probably want one or two interactive bits. That's all. The other thing I've found also is that giving that time for them to interact, it's great on the one hand, but it can lead into the dangers of actually running out of time and actually not getting through the materials. So that's something I've found. Feedback fatigue, yes, that was one comment that was made by one of the students. Said, don't bother too much about this feedback. Yeah, so it's not all good news. I'm hoping to write this up at the end of the process, but it's a much more what's the word? It's much more of a representative, I think, of view and a real-time view of what's happening actually on the module at that time. And for me, the thing that sold it for me and was, that student with the hearing difficulties, and just thinking, my God, I could have actually gone through all the module, and the poor person couldn't hear. So that there are things that have worked better than others, and some things that haven't.
Thanks, Bob. There's a lot of chat in there. I can't see any specific questions. If anyone's got one, just speak up. I'll just ask Bob a very quick one while we do. So social media, Twitter may be on its way out by Christmas if we read the reports. So what channels do you use and engage with your students on, and are they okay to kind of delve their personal lives and academic lives, kind of integrate them together by using platforms that they may use for both purposes?
I've not found any difficulties with that. I mean, I've used it, to be honest, Ian, to place into the curriculum things that are actually happening, here and now. I can't, once we actually set off teaching, it's very difficult sometimes to actually embed things that are, happened yesterday. Whereas the Padlet and social media actually have been my platform to actually do that. I think the jobs. The job opportunities speak for themselves. I'm actually just looking across my office now to one of the cards sent to me by a student who actually told me that she actually got a job. She was successful in the job, having first seen it on our Facebook page. So that speaks for itself, but it's not everything for everyone by any means.
Thanks, Bob. And the final question, I missed it. Thanks, Rachel, for highlighting for Felicity. So I'm interested in how long it takes you to set this up, given your regular responses.
It's to actually respond to the students themselves. That's very quick. Literally, the form updates. I just copy the text into a Word document, which I actually keep then rolling, so I can actually see what I've responded to previously. I can see what the students have asked, what question they've asked, and I can very often respond to it very, very quickly. Sometimes a little bit longer, if I'm going to put a link to another resource in there. But generally speaking, I'm going to guess certainly no more than 20 minutes, I would have thought. That's the amount of time it's taken me to respond to students week on week.
Great. Thanks, Bob.